Over the past decade, I've spent a lot of time really honing my photography skills and experimenting with a lot of different styles. But none more than street photography, especially in recent years. But like anyone, I have my own strengths and weaknesses, often shaped by my own ideas about what street photography should be. But that's one thing I've noticed, especially here on YouTube, and that's how narrow the conversation around street photography can sometimes feel. There's often a very rigid sense of what it should or shouldn't be. But the way I see it, this genre is incredibly vast and diverse, with so much room for exploration. So heading to Bangkok for a week to purely focus on street photography, I asked myself, is my own mindset somehow limiting the way I shoot? And how can I really challenge this? Who knows, maybe even explore the common advice I see a lot of: shoot wider and get closer. So in this video, I wanted to work on 5 different approaches that sometimes I do quite poorly or just don't do enough of with my street photography. From here in Bangkok, hopefully switch up my approach, hopefully get some interesting results. Let's jump in. The first one I focused on here in Bangkok was the art of layering. Now this one has always been a bit of a challenge for me, composing these more complex layers within a scene, lining up multiple subjects spread across different depths through your frame. I definitely tend to lean more towards cleaner, more minimal compositions with my street photography, often just with a single subject. And yes, I still like these more minimal compositions, but the other reason I haven't had a lot of success with layering is simple. It's hard to do well. Finding scenes with layering potential is one thing, but making the overall image still interesting and eye-catching is another. You can have plenty of subjects and depth, but if the elements just don't come together in a meaningful way, the photo can still be pretty boring to look at, in my opinion. So here are a few examples I captured around Bangkok, really working on this art of layering. I'd say pretty mixed results, but I did find a few compositions I really liked. So what I learned from trying to incorporate more layers like this is that it's definitely a skill that takes regular practice. One that I really enjoyed the challenge of, and no doubt will do more of in the future in my own way moving forward. Now on to the next one, which is favoring landscape orientation. Don't worry, I will get to the classic shoot wider, get closer later on. But this is another habit that's become really easy to fall into, mostly because of how photos are shown on these things. I do make a conscious effort to shoot more in landscape, but I'll admit, I still tend to favor a portrait orientation, a habit Instagram has definitely done to many of us. That said, it's incredibly valuable to train your eye to always look for both, especially with street photography. Sure, some scenes do work better in portrait, but others are just made for landscape. So while in Bangkok, I really tried to be mindful of this. This spot, for example, when the kids were jumping off the bridge here, I knew I'd only really get one shot at this moment. So landscape just made the most sense here, and I went for this over portrait. I certainly found myself seeing more scenes in landscape. Especially walking through these markets, I really made an effort to use this horizontal space more deliberately. Another one here, as this monk walked through the scene, you can notice that I targeted landscape first, but once he approached closer into the frame, it suited to switch up to portrait. Funnily enough, this is another reason I like making content for YouTube, because it actually helps with this, since the images I share in the video and even the thumbnails are naturally more suited to landscape as well. So my lessons here, I do need to keep working on this, but it's definitely beneficial for your growth as a photographer. If your goals are purely more around growth on Instagram, maybe it's a different story. Next up, looking for abstractions. So I've always found abstract elements in street photography interesting, whether it's shapes, colors, textures, even motion. Always really inspired by the likes of the great Sol Leiter and Ernst Haas, but it's not something I always do consistently well myself. So the goal here was simple: look for ways to create compelling abstractions using things like blur, reflections, silhouettes, and especially just by using composition, like some of these examples here. This is what I really wanted to push this time, was finding abstraction through composition. This shot, for example, I liked how the meat formed part of the subject's head, looking for these quirky, unexpected moments. Unfortunately, he was sitting under this red umbrella, which threw off the overall color tone, and it didn't quite stand out enough in black and white, but still an interesting frame. Another thing I explored here was slightly more minimal compositions, often with a longer focal length, only showing a fragment of the scene, just like this pair of feet that I caught right on the edge of the frame, or hands at work in various positions like these. I always love how shots like this really leave the rest of the image open to the viewer's imagination, much like this image from the great Soul Lighter, which is definitely an inspiration. I also experimented with mirrors, especially these bike mirrors, which are everywhere in Bangkok. They're perfect for capturing these fragmented reflections such as these, also finding a few other interesting mirrors scattered around as well. Lastly, of course, I also played with some motion. This shot was one of my favorite, both the colors and the motion blur. I also found this mirror where I captured some panning shots within the reflection, which for me created some really interesting results. This one, I noticed some steam here rising from a pot and thought, would this look interesting with a slow shutter? The result, almost like this ghostly, the steam just has its own character. This served as a fun reminder of how abstract moments can really pop up anywhere if you're looking for them, but this really is key. You need to be looking for them. So giving yourself a goal or a target to look for abstractions like this, I really found useful. All right, on to number 4, which was finding unique ways to frame a subject by shooting through different objects. So much like the first technique, we can actually also call this a form of layering, but rather than using layers of subjects, we have layering elements or objects, especially in the foreground. This is one I probably already practiced the most. Some of my favorite shots come from framing a subject through windows, crowds, objects, whatever I can find that adds depth and intrigue. But of course, there's always ways to improve and to switch up my approach a bit. Like these examples here, by using an object in the foreground to frame the subject, we can create some negative space, which is that unoccupied area around the subject that can help bring balance and really draw our eye more deliberately to the subject. Framing like this not only isolates our subject a bit more, but can also add this element of depth. I also tried shooting through people and crowds a bit more, again similar to layering, but here the focus was really using the scene to frame one specific subject. There's definitely crossover here with abstractions as well, as things like reflections can also be one way to create these interesting frames. What really matters with this kind of shot to me is how well you separate your subject from the background. Example here, the way this cat is framed against the background really makes it stand out. So direction of light can be key, but so is your choice of angle and how you use the elements around you. In this shot, I was shooting through a small gap in a fence, which helped isolate the subject here and really made them pop. I found markets like this in these next few examples were a really perfect place for experimentation. There are always little gaps, layers, colors, and all kinds of visual elements to play with. Another approach that when you set yourself something intentional to look for like this, it really does open up opportunities. All right, on to the last one, and probably the most common piece of advice I see on YouTube: shoot wider and get closer. And to be honest, this is one I struggle with the most. As you'll see from my examples, this approach doesn't always sit naturally with me. I did push myself here in Bangkok, but it's definitely outside my comfort zone for a few different reasons. For me, the challenge is simple. I don't want to make people uncomfortable. Sometimes you can get close without being intrusive, but other times it does just create a certain level of unease in the subject. And personally, those kind of photos I don't really enjoy making. That said, here are a few more positive results. They still might not feel particularly close to some, but they were shot reasonably wide at 35mm, which is already a nice shift for me considering I'm so comfortable at 50mm. So the shooting wider, I did enjoy the challenge of. Trying to compose wider than you're used to is always a fun and rewarding challenge. Maybe 35 for some isn't that wide, but it can be for me. This one I really like. It's not super close, but a moment I generally enjoyed capturing. And that's the key for me. It still needs to feel authentic. In the end, I realized something important. If getting closer means compromising how I feel about the interaction or the moment, then I'm okay with stepping back just a little. If that means I'm not a street photographer in some people's eyes, I'm perfectly fine with that. At the end of the day, it is important to push yourself outside your comfort zone in many ways, as this will help grow and improve your photography. But you don't always need to go against your beliefs or try to fit yourself neatly into a set genre or a set label others may put on genres. Try new things, yes, but ultimately your unique style will be formed from how you want to interact with the world, as well as how you choose to see it. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this one. I really loved shooting around Bangkok and was pretty happy with the results from this little experiment. Please do subscribe and check out some of my other videos too. Keep on creating, keep on growing, my friends. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.